The Dan Dix Show.
All right, welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dan Dix Show. I am your host, Dan Dix. Glad to have you joining us here today on TalkNetwork.com. And unfortunately, you know, it's almost, I'm sad to say that every week now, it seems that there's some other type of terrorist action or act that has occurred this week that needs to be talked about. I mean, whether it be terrorists who are meeting in Paris right now to decide how they're going to put together their new world order based on this climate change fraud, or whether it be these, you know, terrorists in the Middle East who are causing a great deal of destabilization right now, but who are created and armed and trained and funded by the Western nations. And of course, we're seeing some of this spill over into Western nations now, potentially. I mean, it's escalating a great deal. There was a stabbing recently in the London tube station, basically, where somebody was allegedly shouting out that this is all for Syria. And, of course, there was the San Bernardino shooting very recently. Allegedly, these Islamic extremists, as they're calling them, having ties to ISIS. But, you know, still so much information to try to wrap our heads around all of this stuff. And I want to just get to our guest for today, who we're going to be joined on the line right now by Josh Steffler. Josh has a live show of his own. He has Freedom for All Radio or Freedom for All TV. It's a live show that broadcasts on live stream. We'll have a link for you in the description. And he's also been heavily involved in and out over time with the Libertarian Party, and he actually has been running the We Are Change Victoria chapter of We Are Change. I got to say, probably hands down one of the best, no, not one of the best We Are Change chapter in Canada. And nothing that's bad about any other Change chapters in Canada. I mean, Ottawa, you know, Toronto, all you guys are great. But the guys here in Victoria have really been holding it down and doing a great job. So, Josh Steffler, thanks so much, man, for joining us here on the Dan Dix Show.
Well, thanks for having me, Dan. It's an honor. I've been following you for a while, and you know, I got to say, it's really one of your videos that actually got me involved. And back in the day, with the SPP and all of this stuff, but it was a Canada Day. Out in Canada Day here, we had like these police state measures being enacted on buses where they were randomly searching people. And you were doing this Canada Day DVD giveaway, and I got involved, and haven't stopped ever since. So thank you.
Yeah, that's going back quite a few years ago. For the listeners who may not be aware, we used to do a Canada Day DVD giveaway, and we did make an annual event where all across the nation, it was really incredible how it caught on in various cities all across Canada, where people on Canada Day began giving away Press for Truth documentaries. At that time, I think we had already had The Nation's Deathbed out, and we had United We Fall out, and possibly even Into the Fire. Since then, we've done a couple more documentary films, but, you know, those are some of the actions that back in the day are just great things to do. And I know you guys have been doing a lot of that similar kind of stuff at We Are Change, with your We Are Change chapter in Victoria, right? Yeah. I mean, tell us what, like, you guys put on a lot of events there. I mean, what
we do? Yeah, we do. We host weekly public meetings every Sunday night. They used to go from 7 till 9/11. But the coffee shop that we are meeting our public meetings at closes at 9, so we're done before 9/11. So, which was kind of the ironic end time. But we meet every Sunday, probably 50 weeks out of the year. We host weekly movie nights or town hall events, public speakers. We are really tight with Dr. Tim Ball, who really works hard to expose the climate scam, which the Paris terrorists are engaging in right now. Mm-hmm. And that we just had a big Dr. Tim Ball climate change town hall 2 weeks ago at We Are Change Victoria, and we filled the coffee shop. We live streamed it. we've just been growing and growing. People come, people leave. You know, like every truth group, of course, there's differences and divisions. Sometimes I feel like it's cointelpro or the New World Order working to divide us. Climate change comes up so much, and here in Victoria, we are a heavy government, military, union town, so it's hard to be libertarian and make friends, but we get people that come that are really concerned about left-wing issues, and then when they find out that we're not, that we have common ground on the left-wing issues, but we also have some right-wing issues as well, it divides us, and the meetings, they grow, they shrink, they grow, they shrink. But on average, we have about 20 people a week. Yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm coming from Ontario. I moved to BC just about a year ago. And, it's such a different experience for me out here compared to back in Ontario, where I've noticed there is this sense of more of these kind of, well, we've kind of been calling them jokingly over the years, these green Nazis. I mean, there's something about it over here that's just different than it is in the West, where, I mean, there's even certain taxes on certain, plastic bottles and things that I've never seen over in Ontario. And the people take it very, very seriously. Why is that? What's the disconnect, or what's the difference between the mentality of the people here towards climate change versus out in Ontario?
Well, I'm kind of biased. I live on Vancouver Island, but I think it's just our beautiful nature, our supernatural British Columbia, right? That's our tagline, and the propaganda is hard here, because they show images of, old-growth forest, pristine coastlines. We've got it all. We've got mountains, forests, rivers, ocean. We've really got all of the, the elements here. So people want to protect that, and they get hijacked by radicals. And we call them, in Victoria, we call them the watermelons, the green on the outside, red on the inside.
Yeah.
These Marxists that have hijacked environmentalism to push cultural Marxism. And so I think that's why it's so much different here, is because so many people's jobs are government. We've got the federal, provincial, and municipal government all in Victoria and Vancouver. We've got many powerful unions here, many NGOs, and so a lot of their jobs don't rely on any sort of free market exchange, so they're happy to enact these freedom-choking regulations all in the name of protecting the environment, when really they don't protect the environment, they just push more cultural Marxism and big government on us. So they're kind of hijacked, I feel.
Yeah, it seems like these people obviously have potentially good intentions, but it's just...
Definitely.
It seems that the so-called solutions are geared towards the wrong area. I mean, I notice here on your Facebook page, you recently posted an article here, and I'll just quickly read it for the listeners.
Sure.
Australia's Prime Minister, PM's advisor, climate change is UN hoax to create a new world order. The Australian Prime Minister's chief business advisor has accused the United Nations of using debunked climate change science to lead a new world order. Provocative claims made to coincide with the visit from the top UN climate. He goes on to say here, the real agenda is concentrated political authority. He says global warming is the hook, and it's all about a new world order under the control of the UN. What's your thoughts? I mean, this is a PM advisor.
He's right. I'm pretty good friends with Dr. Tim Ball, and he nails it so much. Carbon dioxide is not a pollution. And the idea that, if we're able to convince people that carbon dioxide is a pollution, then every other breath that every human being takes is pollution. Mm-hmm. And it's not. And the solutions are always more government, subsidizing more energy companies. And it's weird because these are the people that are against subsidizing oil companies, because subsidizing oil companies is bad. Mm-hmm. But then they want to turn around and subsidize other energy companies, which for me is morally bankrupt, because the government should not be picking winners and losers. The government should not be subsidizing anyone, really. The government, I'm sort of a minarchist, a libertarian, where government is supposed to protect our liberties, defend the borders, that kind of thing, not be subsidizing energy companies, because that's where corruption, that's where cronyism, that's where corporatism really gets its stranglehold on our, if you want to call it democracy, it's more like a mockeracy, but that's where they get the stranglehold, and it's the power, the centralized government, the centralized taxation, and they're pushing hard for a tax on air, and it just blows me away. A tax on air itself is ludicrous. We've got greenhouses out here that pump more than 1,000 parts per million of CO2 into the greenhouses so that the plants produce more food, and yet we've been convinced that there's more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than ever before, which is not true, and that it's going to create massive deserts, which is not true, that it's causing all of these extreme weather events, which it's not. That's just not true.
You set a dangerous precedent when you suggest that something that is on the periodic table of elements, carbon dioxide, something that we breathe out, carbon dioxide, is potentially a killer, something that is potentially a poisonous gas. That's kind of a precedent setter, really, don't you think? I mean,
it's anti-human. It is completely anti-human to suggest that the exhalation of human beings is pollution, because it's not. It isn't. There's been more CO2 in our atmosphere before during the Carboniferous period, I believe it's called, the dinosaur age. Okay, there was more than 1,000 parts per million of CO2. The temperature didn't go up crazily like they talk about, because CO2 doesn't drive the temperature. Temperature drives CO2. The hotter it gets, the more CO2 comes. It follows. And it's deadly. It is so anti-human, because now we can start regulating people's breaths. They can tax us. They can regulate our carbon footprint, which means restrictions on your mobility, your energy use, your reproduction. You've had too many children now. They're producing too much carbon dioxide yourself. We're going to have to cut you off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a prime example right now of this is what we've seen going on in Alberta right now. I mean, the Alberta has, for people out there who are listening may not know this, has elected the NDP as their government, and they're now basically paving the way for carbon taxes, basically taxing your individual carbon footprint, and jobs are already being destroyed. I want to get your thoughts on this, Josh. We're coming up to the break, but on the other side of the break, we're going to come back. We'll talk a little bit about this current NDP swing in Alberta and how they're pushing this climate carbon tax on the people as their solution. This is a globalist solution to this problem. Stick around. We'll be right back after the break.
Welcome to the Health Minute. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, with my sidekick Tonto, not far behind. The topic today is, what about heavy metals in superfoods and nutritional supplements, and even certified organic products that are coming from China? Well, you may not be aware of this yet, but the Talk Network online store, which you'll find at store.talknetwork.com, uses our own private laboratory, where I am the lab science director, and we test everything that we sell for toxic heavy metals, such as lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, and even elements with radioactive isotopes, such as uranium, strontium, and cesium. And if it doesn't show up as really, really clean, we reject it. And yes, we test this with university-level equipment, ICP-MS instrumentation, sensitive down to parts per billion concentrations. So if you want really clean foods, superfoods, and nutritional supplements that are laboratory validated, get them now at store.talknetwork.com.
All right, and we're back. This is the Dan Dix Show. I'm your host, Dan Dix, and we're joined on the line by our guest, Josh Steffler. And just before the break, we were talking a little bit about how this carbon taxes are coming, and right here in Canada anyways, under the Alberta's NDP government, they are essentially kind of paving the way potentially for the rest of Canadians to follow suit. What's your thoughts about what's happening in Alberta right now as a result to this climate change so-called crisis that isn't even a problem in the first place?
Well, we talked about this on my show a couple weeks ago, Freedom Free for All, and they are looking at punishing anybody that emits carbon, and they talk about it like carbon, and that's a mind job in itself, because carbon itself is coal. It's dark, it's sooty, it's black, it's messy. Meanwhile, they're actually talking about carbon dioxide, which is an invisible life-giving gas, and you're already seeing job losses, jobs that are disappearing. The Alberta Energy Minister told oil workers, I think it was yesterday or maybe it was Friday, that if they don't like it, they can move to BC until it gets better in Alberta. And it just shows that this is another attack on Alberta's energy sector, which is a main economic driver of Canada. Mm-hmm. A lot of our social programs that Canadians enjoy really do derive from the profits and the wealth redistribution, so to speak, of the energy, the money that comes out of Alberta oil and its energy programs. And it's looking like it's going to cost the average Albertan about $500 per person per year. And the sad thing is it's only going to go up. And it seems like it once a carbon tax is enacted, it never goes away. We had one in BC here for 5 years, I believe, 6 years now, and it's only caused fuel prices to go up. And when fuel prices go up, these people seem to forget that everything gets here by truck, and trucks run on fuel. So fuel, when you make fuel more expensive, you make food more expensive, you make goods more expensive, which hurts the poor. These taxes, and the most insidious thing is that then they turn around and they give the poor people rebates, so that they're bribing the poor people with their own money so that they want higher carbon taxes, and then it just drives the cost of food, energy, everything up, and the pittance that they get in these rebates doesn't even cover the amount that they're spending on their fuel, their food, any of the goods and services that they buy. It's ludicrous, and it's dangerous because it's not going away. And I would hope that, you said that Alberta elected the NDP, but I don't think they really did elect the NDP. I think they were looking to punish the PCs, and the Wild Rose just dropped the ball. Like they failed miserably. Danielle Smith kind of stabbed them all in the back there and wrecked their chances, and now they're stuck with the NDP. So the NDP knows that they're not going to get another mandate. Mm-hmm. So they're working as hard and as fast as they can to completely centralize and destabilize their energy industry and enact these taxes that are just going to hurt people and farmers and families and the poor especially.
Well, what about on the federal level? Do you think people actually wanted a Liberal majority, or do you think Canadians were more just fed up with Stephen Harper, fed up with the Conservative government, and just ready for change, ready for hope, whatever you want to call it?
It's kind of like we're maybe 10 years behind the States, when people were so tired of George Bush that anybody but Bush looked better, and that's how Obama rose to power. And it's the same thing up here with Stephen Harper. Even though it was the entire Conservative cabinet and government that caused a lot of these problems, everybody focused on this one man, and there was that sort of Harper derangement syndrome where people hated this guy more than bullies at their high school. Like, they hated him like they'd hated their worst arch enemy that they've ever had in their entire lives, and it became an irrational hatred. So I think that it wasn't, again, so much that we elected the Liberals in, but we kicked the Conservatives out. And fortunately, we didn't we don't have to suffer under an NDP government, but this isn't going to be good for Canada either. No. Not that the Conservatives were. I was hoping for a libertarian majority government myself. I mean, protecting property rights, lowering taxes, letting families decide where their money should go to it sounds good to me. Let's give freedom a try.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean,
sure.
Perhaps I know, there's still a great deal of Canadians who are completely unaware that the party even exists, and maybe if people did know that there were other options here, that's one thing they ought to know, that they have these options. What has your involvement been with the Libertarian Party, and when did you first started getting involved with it here in Canada?
Well, in Canada, it was with the election of Tim Moen as the new party leader. I'd always been kind of wary about party politics because of, party whips, party mantras, the no-talk lists, kind of the top-down control that you see in the Liberals, the NDP, the Conservatives, the Green, where they want to control you rather than you controlling the party. And the Libertarian Party was much, much different than that. Of course, I feel like we had a bit of problems because we were surging in popularity. Of course, some parasites get in there and they try and seize power. You may want to say that they're the New World Order. You may want to say that it's just a coincidence that these people happened to see that we were rising to power and popularity and seize these opportunities. But there were some really bad people that got involved in the upper echelons of the Libertarian Party and really started to get us to fight with each other. And the funny thing about libertarians is we may agree on 98% of the thing, but we'll fight to the death over those 2% of the things that we disagree on.
Yeah, very passionate.
And, with Tim Moen, who was an amazing leader, an amazing speaker, just a great, great guy to be leading the Libertarian Party, I thought that we really had a chance to win. And then there was that whole, you were covering some of the Lauren Southern stuff, and the Libertarian Party did manage to uphold its principles of free speech, not controlling its members, and we did pretty well. This is the best election that the Libertarian Party has ever had. We had, I believe, 118 candidates, and we did really well in Victoria. We had people running against Elizabeth May in her own riding. We had Libertarians running against Stephen Harper in his riding.
I think it was one of the biggest years by far for Libertarians in Canada. It really kind of took off, not like any other year before it, really.
And I think it comes to one of the memes that Tim Moen was pushing out there, where it was that he believes that gay married couples should be able to defend their marijuana plants with guns. And so what it did, that statement, is almost everybody agrees with something in there. If you're for gay marriage, then Libertarian Party's for you. Oh, you're for marijuana rights. Oh, well, Libertarian Party's for you. Oh, gun rights. Totally. Libertarian Party's for you. So that was really a good bridge that built that connected a lot of the common grounds that disenfranchised voters had, because, the liberals and the conservatives, they all have these fundamental flaws in them that just make people despise their parties. A bunch of them supported Bill C-51. A bunch of them they're all for not changing the monetary system and continuing with this fiat fraud that keeps borrowing money at compounding interest from private Federal Reserve banks. One of the main problems that all nations pretty much face now is the central banking fraud. And the liberals, the conservatives, the NDP, even the Green are all in favor of this. And I don't know if you remember that documentary that was going around a while ago called Oh Canada, Our Bought and Sold Land. Elizabeth May was in that, and we've actually, with Freedom Free for All, we've interviewed her and confronted her on her position and how it's changed from going in there and saying that we shouldn't be borrowing from private banks at compounding interest to now she's going along to get along, pretty much, going with the status quo. Look, she's congratulating Justin Trudeau on going $10 billion in deficit every year for the next 3 years. And
so you guys confronted her on actual, proper monetary reform. She agreed.
We've confronted her a few times, yeah.
And then did what, a total 180? And
she's done a total 180. Total 180, and is glad to be seeing that sometimes governments need to borrow to make sure that we can prosper in the lean times, which is, it's ridiculous because in the movie she's talking about how they're borrowing imaginary money that doesn't exist and then putting that on the backs of children that aren't even born yet that now have this debt that's pretty much unpayable. Mm-hmm. And yet she's cheering Justin Trudeau for borrowing $10 billion a year from these crooks, these criminals, these fraudsters that are just printing money that doesn't exist and making us pay for it.
Seems like she's doing what most politicians do, is that they kind of tell you what it is that you want to hear, tell you exactly what you're looking for, and then when it comes down to it, don't actually do anything, and then just carry out the agendas of the globalists and continue to carry on that agenda. One of the ones that Elizabeth May's been pushing a great deal, and I want to get your thoughts on this. We're coming up to the break, but she's been very big into pushing along this Agenda 21 concept and really making it come full circle global. We're coming up to the break. Stick around, guys. We're going to be back on the other side to talk a little bit about Agenda 21 coming to Canada. Stick around.
Welcome to the Health Minute with the Health Ranger. One of the ways the system controls you and keeps you down is by literally poisoning your brain with toxic heavy metals like lead. Believe it or not, a lot of the supplements and vitamins that are sold out there are actually made by pharmaceutical companies using cheap ingredients that are contaminated with lead. And lead decreases your IQ. The more you eat, the more dumbed down you become. And that's what the system wants. But if you want to explore your maximum potential as a creative, divine, unique individual, you need to keep your mind free of toxic heavy metals like lead. And that's my specialty. I run a lab where we test all the supplements and superfoods that we offer for all the heavy metals, including lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium. And that's why everything that we offer at the Talk Network store is laboratory validated for cleanliness and purity. Protect your brain by feeding it right at store.talknetwork.com. Welcome to the Health Minute. I'm Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, with my sidekick Tonto, not far behind. The topic today is, what about heavy metals in superfoods and nutritional supplements and even certified organic products that are coming from China? Well, you may not be aware of this yet, but the Talk Network online store, which you'll find at store.talknetwork.com, uses our own private laboratory, where I am the lab science director, and we test everything that we sell for toxic heavy metals, such as lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, and even elements with radioactive isotopes, such as uranium, strontium, and cesium. And if it doesn't show up as really, really clean, we reject it. And yes, we test this with university-level equipment, ICP-MS instrumentation, sensitive down to parts per billion concentrations. So if you want really clean foods, superfoods, and nutritional supplements that are laboratory validated, get them now at store.talknetwork.com.
All right, and we're back. Welcome back, folks. This is the Dan Dix Show. I'm your host, Dan Dix, and we're joined on the line right now by Josh Steffler. And right before the break, we were talking a little bit about Elizabeth May and some of the, kind of policies that she's been pushing here in Canada. And for those of you the listeners may not know, she's actually one of the ones who's a huge proponent of Agenda 21 and really kind of helping to bring this all together. So, Josh, you've been researching this for a number of years. What's your understanding of this United Nations document? I believe came out in the early 90s. Agenda 21. What's the agenda there?
Well, the agenda is complete global control. It is the elimination of rural communities and forcing us into mega cities that hedge us in. It's like creating human zoos. Elizabeth May was involved in writing and documenting it with another globalist, Maurice Strong, who recently died. We talked about him on our show last week. And they brought it forth in Rio, 1993, the Agenda 21, an agenda for the 21st century. And it's all about eliminating property rights, forcing people to go along with these green agendas, creating massive tracts of land that humans are not allowed to go in. They call it rewilding, forcing us out of private ownership of automobiles, limiting our mobility. It's a terrible idea, and it is a Marxist's wet dream. It is centralized control. It is global dominance. It's the complete elimination of national sovereignty and the rise of the United Nations as not only the fourth level of government, but like the last and only level of government. We have, again, on Freedom Free For All, we confronted Elizabeth May on Agenda 21. And, you know, if you go to our Freedom Free For All YouTube channel, you can see that this interview that I gave with her, and it was so amazing because she was so on point on so many things. We talked to her about 9/11, and she even went in to say that, you know, she may not believe the official story, that the United States government has lied about things before, like with the Lithuania. So she's even talking about conspiracy theories, but then she gets into Agenda 21 and says that that's just a right-wing conspiracy theory that never went anywhere, and that it's completely, what was the quote? She said, it's all voluntary. Meanwhile, Agenda 21 has been implemented surreptitiously by municipal governments. A lot of times, municipal governments, they are the farm teams for the big three, Liberals, NDP, Conservatives, and it's amazing how much control municipal governments, like your local city government, has over your life, your property, and your liberty. And so there's this organization called ICLEI that sneaks into municipal halls. I believe Vancouver and Burnaby are members of ICLEI. Vancouver West, or it's either Vancouver West or one of the other municipalities in there that has Vancouver in it. Saanich out here is a member of ICLEI, and they implement these agendas. They call them like Environmental Development Protection Acts and green belts, green ways, and carbon solutions, carbon priorities. It sneaks into the language, and Agenda 21 is not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy, and it is fact that these greenies they believe that they're acting benevolently, but they're actually acting completely authoritarian, that they despise automobiles, they despise our free mobility, our free choice.
Well, it's almost becoming like a new religion or something. I mean, you mentioned the remodeling in the UN, talking about protecting, the land. This is bringing tree hugging to a whole new level. This is putting the rivers and the lakes and the trees and the rocks on par with human beings, isn't it?
I would say that it's even putting them above the value of human life. And as a libertarian, I value all life. Like, every person that's born has a right to their life, their liberty, and their property. And this isn't even tree hugging anymore. It's Gaia worship, and it is a new religion, and it's practiced by conservatives, by liberals, by New Democrats, by Greens, by people that say that they're nonpartisan but are on numerous municipal and non-governmental organization boards, starting to sneak into corporations with what you see as greenwashing, right? And it is really, really insidious. It is the complete control over our daily lives. It is the control over how we live our lives, how we spend our energy, how we travel, how we get around. I mean, I don't think that automobiles are the worst thing that has ever happened. As a father, I have 3 children, and there is no way that I could keep my children active and use public transit. Public transit sucks. Mm. And if I wanted to get like my son to kung fu and my daughter to dance and my other daughter to swimming all in the same night, I can't do it. You know, it's not like I'm a soccer mom or anything, but the soccer moms, those are the women and the families that Agenda 21 hurts, because you can't get your children to all of these social events that they need to get to on public transit. And you're starting to see even more that when you let your children go out by themselves, you get social services called on you. An 8-year-old catches the bus to hockey, boom, that's a visit from social services. That's child neglect. A 10-year-old walks to school by themselves, boom, that's another call from social services. So they've got us coming and going, and I feel bad for these people that believe that the carbon fraud, because they're good people. They believe that they're trying to save the world, right? And what better and more moral high ground is there to saving the world from pollution? But they're confused because carbon dioxide is not pollution. There is real pollution that we need to worry about, like Fukushima. You know, like nuclear waste that's getting dumped into the oceans, like military, like I think the military is the biggest polluter. You know, you remember in Libya, there was evidence that NATO was using depleted uranium in Libya, and there's ample evidence. Well, it's been proven that the United States military used depleted uranium in Iraq. Yep. So
people forget too that Canada is one of the biggest suppliers, or has been, of depleted uranium coming out of Montreal. I believe. Yeah,
so that's on our hands. And I don't mean to say yours and my hands, but I mean those nasty politicians that steal from us, and then they're so patriotic that they'll put our lives on the line for their freedom and their goals, right? It's dangerous. And
well, how dare you speak out against this, you know?
These people have been hoodwinked, totally hoodwinked. And, you know, we talk about all of this stuff on our show, Freedom Free For All. It goes every Tuesday night at 7:30. It's live. We've been doing it we're in our season 5 now. We've been doing the last 2 seasons live, but we get our show on local media. What is it?
You're on Access Cable Television, aren't you?
Access Cable, and you should hear some of the emails and the phone calls that people have done complaining about us. We've made a video joking around about this one phone call that we got where this lady's like, I think that your television station has been hijacked by political radicals. What is this? Freedom for all? Get this off the air.
It has been hijacked. We need to hijack the mainstream TV.
Yeah, we do, because it's deprogramming. The television and media has been weaponized, and we're seeing it massively weaponized against people with this carbon fraud. And so that's why what you and I and guys like Josh Sigurdsson out of Winnipeg and all new media, this is what we're doing. We're trying to deprogram and fight back against massive weaponized government propaganda and corporate disinformation, mainstream lies. These things, they must be stopped. And that's why you also see things like net neutrality coming under assault, because this is a battleground, and they're losing. Hillary Clinton made a mention that this is an info war, and we're losing. Of course they're losing, because they've been lying for so long. And finally, we have the freedom and the access and the intelligence and the technology to massively fight back and restrict their influence on people's minds, and we're now doing the influencing. We're helping people. We're not regurgitating government lies. We are doing the real job that media is supposed to do, which is investigative journalism, broadcasting truth, asking tough questions. And you see it in all sorts of new media. Luke Radowski is amazing at challenging politicians and catching them in in all of their lives and confronting these guys, and they have become so complacent because people like CBC, NBC, CTV Global, they just lob softball questions at them. So they're completely unprepared when they're holding press conferences, and boom, there's someone from independent media or new media asking the most tough questions that they aren't prepared for.
Yeah, well, you know, that's a perfect example of exactly what we have to do, especially now as the propaganda, as you said, is being poured on so thick. You know, it's coming on so thick right now, and, you know, it bears to mention this is also this thick pouring on of the propaganda and brainwashing and conditioning is happening in a time where everything is coming back to having to be politically correct now. You know, where it's taboo to talk about certain issues and you have to kind of dance around certain topics. What's your thoughts on this current PC movement, I guess you could call it, where everybody's so worried about being politically correct, not speaking out of fear of being labeled a racist or Islamophobic or you know, or an anti-Semite of the past, or you know, what's your thoughts? Everybody's just seems that they're afraid to speak their mind now, and they just need to be in their safe space.
Well, I believe that it is definitely cointelpro, and I'm sure you know what cointelpro is, but maybe the viewers or listeners don't, which means that it's a counterintelligence program. It is, I believe that it is government weaponizing media again and looking to silence dissenters so that you can't talk about politics having anything to do with feminism or racism or gun control or anything without having to be completely neutered, and it dumbs people down. It's Orwellian in the fact that it is the creation of Newspeak. I think we're literally watching the birth of Newspeak with these PC thugs that are telling us we can't say certain things. We can't suggest that, you know what, maybe it's not the guns, maybe it's the mental
illness. It's 1984 is what it is. We're coming up to the break. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back with Josh Steffler.
Welcome to the Health Minute with the Health Ranger. You know, one of the ways the system controls you and keeps you down is by literally poisoning your brain with toxic heavy metals like lead. Believe it or not, a lot of the supplements and vitamins that are sold out there are actually made by pharmaceutical companies using cheap ingredients that are contaminated with lead. And lead decreases your IQ. The more you eat, the more dumbed down you become, and that's what the system wants. But if you want to explore your maximum potential as a creative, divine, unique individual, you need to keep your mind free of toxic heavy metals like lead. And that's my specialty. I run a lab where we test all the supplements and superfoods that we offer for all the heavy metals, including lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium. And that's why everything that we offer at the Talk Network store is laboratory validated for cleanliness and purity. Protect your brain by feeding it right at store.talknetwork.com.
All right, we're back. Welcome back to the Dan Dix Show, ladies and gentlemen. We're joined on the line by our guest, Josh Steffler. And just before the break, we were talking about this psychological operation, really, is what you can call it, where, you know, I think this originates, too, from the schools. I mean, we saw the example of the young lady at a Yale University flipping out about the Halloween costumes that her professor, you know, was okay with. And you know, there seems to be something going on in the curriculum or something, because it's not just in Yale and it's not just in these schools. It's happening all over where people are afraid to talk. And as you were saying just before the break, that this is cointelpro. This is a by design psychological
It absolutely
operation.
Is by design. If you see, even people are starting to self-censor themselves when talking about their friends, or talking to their friends, not about their friends, but talking to their friends. It's limiting political speech now, where you can't talk about certain issues, and that you have to go along with this popular mantra that everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything is homophobic, and we have to point it all out. And everything is not racist, everything is not sexist, and everything is not homophobic. it's insidious, and you are right. It is in the schools. I have to, what I call, unschool my children when they come home. My youngest had problems because she came home from school and her teacher had told her that parents that drive their kids to school are killing polar bears. My teenagers have had teachers in their school that tell them that white males are the problem with the world today. Meanwhile, so my son is in school. He's a white male. He shouldn't feel bad about being who he is, but he's being taught that he's a bad person just because he's a white male.
Unbelievable.
And this isn't necessarily every teacher, obviously, but there is a program there. I believe it's Elizabeth Dewar or Elaine Dewar who talked about the deliberate dumbing down of America, and it's happening. Yuri Baryshnikov or Baryshnikov, I believe, he gave like a 25-minute interview on how they are going to infiltrate schools and culture with cultural Marxism and completely demoralize and confuse the population. And it's happening now. They've warned us. They are devils, and they have to tell us what they're doing. And they've told us what they're doing, and now they're doing it. And it's so dangerous. Freedom is so popular, and it's so important that we have to defend it, and that's what new media does. We talk about unpopular things. We express opinions that may not be popular or politically correct, but that's not what freedom means. There's no right to not be offended. Free speech is there specifically to protect the unpopular and the potentially offensive. Like if you remember back, well, you wouldn't remember, but they demonized people suggesting that the sun went around, or the earth went around the sun, and that anybody suggested otherwise was killed. And we're seeing it again. Now you can't say pretty much anything that's not liberal CBC propaganda without being labeled a racist, a misogynist, an anti-feminist. The labels go on and on and on, and it's sad because we really are, Western civilization really is the bastion of liberty. It's a new experiment, and it's important. It's very important to a free humanity that we all have the same rights. We're allowed to talk about unpopular things.
Yeah. Well, we have to protect the... Yeah, exactly. We have to protect the opinions of everyone, even those, especially those that are ones that oppose ours and ones that we don't agree with. I want to get your thoughts on an opinion that's going around on the internet that I haven't touched with the 10-foot pole yet, but I think you guys have touched on this. These flat earthers, this is really boggling my mind at how big it's getting.
It is.
Oh my God, I'm seeing it everywhere now, and I noticed. Yeah, you guys have touched on this briefly on your show.
We did a show on it 3 weeks ago on Freedom Free for All, and I really dug into this because I had good friends that came to our We Are Change meetings and just started calling everyone shills and behaving badly because we didn't agree with the flat earth, this new revelation that the earth is flat. I mean, we had this discussion. It's long over. The world is not flat. And it is, in my opinion, again, cointelpro. I talked about how Cass Sunstein, Obama's information czar, talked about conspiracy theories and how dangerous they were to the government. And so he proposed that government agents infiltrate conspiracy theory groups, specifically 9/11 truth groups, and actively and cognitively infiltrate and disseminate false information. And if you notice, a lot of the flat earth stuff comes from our fellow 9/11 truthers, and it is designed to push people back into the comfort of government propaganda, because after years and years of somebody working on their friends telling them that 9/11 was an inside job, buildings don't fall that way, jet fuel doesn't melt steel, all of it. But by the way, did you also know that the earth is flat? You just, oh my God, it makes me angry because it is blatant Cass Sunstein programming to make us all look like fools.
Yeah.
it's ludicrous, and the people don't even listen to reason anymore. They just say everything with a curve is fisheye lens. There's no evidence except for gravity, but then they dismiss gravity as just a theory, and it is really insidious, and I work actively to fight against it. You can't just let it go, because these people are our friends. They're being manipulated. They're being confused, and they are destroying their credibility and the credibility of those around them, and working to push people again away from new media, away from independent media, back into the loving embrace of corporate fascist CBC, like corporate government media that, you know, the media regurgitates whatever the government says, and the government's right, because maybe people were going to believe that 9/11 was an inside job, but the guy also told them that the earth is flat.
Right.
And
maybe we're having such an effect, you know. Maybe the mainstream they need to throw a wrench in the plans here. They need to put in this false, you know, this disinfo to get people bickering and arguing and infighting, and to be able to make people, you know, you could easily point something out, call somebody crazy kook, you know, by labeling them with this label. Oh yeah, and it's just sad. It really is sad, because this is what the New World Order does. And if you've seen those Illuminati cards, they even have the flat earthers as those cards. And I'm not saying that those have predicted everything, but there's a lot of theories that those Illuminati cards have predicted a lot of things, and the flat earthers are in there. That's interesting.
It's sad, really.
Well, it is sad. It's as you said, it's muddying the waters, really, and it's making it more difficult for guys like you and guys like me to be considered credible sources out there when we get pinned into this category of they'll flat earther, climate denier, you know, it goes on and on. They'll try to pin us into these sections. But this is something that in alternative media is something you can't, dwell on. It's something that we just have to forge forward and continue to just lead by example. And, you know, that's why, you know, I try to just, you know, focus on it and think about, you know, where we have to go from here, you know. And so just coming up in the final few minutes here, on that note, solution-wise, you know, you guys are doing a great job at leading the charge, especially with your live show. I mean, it's been going on for a long time now. Let people know, you know, if they want to get involved with you guys, first of all, where do they go to catch the show? Let them know how often the show, where do they go to catch the show, when does it air?
So you could go to freedomfreeforall.com, or just go on YouTube and search Freedom Free for All, and it airs every Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. We do a half-hour news show, and then we do a half-hour with a guest, which is really interactive live media. We take questions from our YouTube viewers. We take questions from email, and we really look to bring the viewer into the show and help them be part of the media, rather than talked at and talked to, but have that conversation with us. So it's every Tuesday night, Freedom Free for All at 7:30, and if you're in Victoria, it airs sporadically on Shaw Channel 4. Every now and then we have a show too controversial and they don't air it for us, but that's what mainstream media does. So, and you can also go to wearechangevictoria.org, where it talks even more about not only the show that we do, but also a lot of the political activism and the 9/11 truth activism, the chemtrail work that we do. We're really a huge tent, and we want to welcome everyone that values freedom, liberty, free speech, real fundamental Canadian values. That's what we're doing. We're looking to build bridges, and we may not agree on everything, but I am sure that if you talk to me, we have common ground on something, and I think that we should work on that rather than letting the New World Order divide us on what we don't agree on.
Yeah, well said. Like, let's focus on what we do agree on. We're working towards the same things here, and I think it kind of comes under the umbrella. And correct me if I'm wrong, but would you agree that it really boils down to freedom, right?
Freedom, absolutely. That's what we're all about. We talk about it. I use the word liberty because I'm a libertarian, but liberty, freedom, justice, honor, Canadian values. That's what we're about.
Yeah, well, that's what people, it seems to maybe need a little bit more of nowadays before our Canadian values get flipped up and turned around and the world views us as something that we're not. I mean, we used to be viewed as peacekeeping kind of a nation, but that seems to all be kind of turning around under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who... It looks like, as we talked about earlier in this show, being the new Barack Obama, basically, is going to be able to get people to march on into Syria and march on into other areas of the Middle East under this humanitarian, under the guise of a humanitarian mission, as opposed to, whereas Harper would have just fear-mongered his way into there. It looks like they may be pulling a bit of a bait and switch to get people to go along with it.
Yeah, to get them to beg to go along with it.
Yeah, the very same people who were opposing it not long ago are now gonna be begging to go in there. Exactly.
Under a red flag instead of a blue flag.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe. Well, it's kind of like that the green analogy, the Waterman analogy that you used on those guys. Anyways, that's the end of the show. I want to thank my guests for joining us. Be sure to check the links in the description, guys, for We Are Change, the Victoria chapter. That's it for the Dan Dix Show. We'll see you next week on TalkNetwork.com.
Be sure to check out dandix.talknetwork.com